we're down to the pointy end of the tournament with the Women's World Cup quarterfinals this weekend. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. It should be a great weekend of rugby with these quarterfinals coming up. Sadly for me, I'm going to be working at the weekend, so I'm actually not going to catch any of the games live, but I will, catch up on them as best I can to, give a summary at least. Probably on Monday, I would imagine. Probably Monday because I got Tuesday off. And then if I can catch some of the games, on delayed or whatever, especially the Ireland game, I will do a review. If I can't watch a game in full, I'm not going to do a review. That's just a rule that I have for myself. Like, I don't want to be doing reviews on games just based on highlights. Okay, so all of that out of the way, I'm going to talk about these quarterfinals. We're going to try and keep this fairly short, but anybody who's watched my channel before, I tend to go on a bit, but we'll see how concise we can keep it today. So, we're going to start with the first quarterfinal, and that is New Zealand versus South Africa. It is a 1 o'clock kickoff. That is UK and Ireland time. So I think 2 o'clock in South Africa. And then I'm not sure in New Zealand, you have to check your local time. If you're watching here in Ireland, you can catch it on RT2. And I'm sure, hopefully it's on free to air in both New Zealand and South Africa and over in the UK as well. So this one's at Sandy Park, so the home of Exeter Rugby. And yeah, it looks a bit of a tasty game, this one. So, you look at these two, you got New Zealand, the winners of Group C, and South Africa, runners up of Pool D. And, New Zealand to get here, just run down through their results. So, started out with a 54-8 victory against Spain, then 62-19 against Japan, and then 40-0 against Ireland. So Japan really the ones that, caused them the most trouble, I would say, in terms of points conceded, certainly. But generally looking comfortable. And that win against Ireland was a real statement. They had to soak up pressure. They kept their defensive discipline. They didn't allow Ireland to score even towards the end when it would have been easy to kind of switch off. And yeah, they took the chances so well too. Just, some real stars in that team as well. And obviously defending champions. Yes, England are overwhelming favourites, but you look at the lineup for, these knockout stages and you think, well, if anybody is potentially going to stop England from claiming a crown that some people have already put on their heads long ago, I think, the Black Ferns team probably the ones to do it. But they're against South Africa. So South Africa started out with a 66-6 victory against Brazil. Then, the pivotal game for them in the pool was that game against Italy. 29-24, kind of won that late on, but deservedly won it as well. And then, playing against pool toppers France, they lost 57 points to 10, but still, they got a try in that game, which Ireland couldn't do against New Zealand. So that's certainly something for them. And, this South Africa team, they're definitely a coming force in women's rugby. They're nowhere near at the level, that the Springboks are at the minute, but vastly improved over the last couple of years, and really looking like, I think in terms of them, you would expect, in terms of prediction for this game, I think New Zealand are going to win it. And I don't think many people are going to be predicting against them in this one. But I do expect South Africa to have periods kind of similar to Ireland, where, they'll have periods where they're putting a little bit of pressure on, they're into 22. But I think South Africa, with 16 tries to New Zealand's 24, will probably actually get over a few times, whereas Ireland couldn't do it. Although, that New Zealand defence, I still think will save some of those, save them in some of those positions where South Africa are maybe threatening. And, that's the thing about this Black Ferns team, is they have that solid defence, and then they have that ability, brilliant on transition, and just so like ruthless as well when they get into the opposition 22, and that's going to be the difference between the teams. I think South Africa maybe have a purple patch, maybe look decent, at some periods in the first half, but you would expect New Zealand, they're going to create enough chances and they have enough ability all across their team, not just in the back line, that they're going to finish off enough of the chances that they create to, win this one. Probably in the end, fairly comfortably, but again, maybe a few kind of road bumps on the way to that victory. But yeah, my prediction for that is New Zealand to win, but South Africa, I'm very interested to see where they're going to be in 4 years' time for the next World Cup, because they're making the same strides as they are at the minute. The current kind of big four in World Rugby, they could absolutely break into that. That's how much they've come on recently. But we've seen teams previously, in World Cups or World Cup cycles, coming up and being kind of at that level. We saw with Ireland there, a few, like whatever it was, 3 or 4 World Cups ago, where they seemed to be at that level and didn't manage to kick on. But I think, South Africa, I think maybe a different beast compared to Ireland, where, they potentially have the playing numbers there to sustain a growth like this, whereas Ireland just weren't able to kind of support that really, and still now there are kind of question marks over the Irish model. But yeah, going to be interesting to see how they go next World Cup around, but I'm predicting New Zealand to win there. Quarterfinal 2 then is Canada versus Australia. So winners of Pool B versus the runners up from Pool A, and this is at 4 o'clock on Saturday. It is at the Ashengate Stadium, so home of Bristol Rugby, and you can watch it on RTE as well. So again, hopefully in Canada and Australia on free to air for as many people to watch as possible, because obviously interest in the women's game has increased immensely. And I have to say as well, we talked about it previously, the whole support structure in terms of what's available on the internet, etc., even since the last World Cup, has improved hugely too. And as the game just gets, it's just going to be bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're hoping that support continues like that as well. So for me, I've enjoyed the tournament thoroughly up to this point, and just again looking forward to these games. But in terms of how these teams got here, so Canada started out with a win against Fiji, 65-7. Then they played Wales 42-0 in that one, and then finally Scotland 40 points to 19 victory. Scotland, competitive for a lot of the game, but you still felt Canada had the edge all the way through, and were able to just kind of seal that, just make absolutely sure of the victory, I think, in the last 5 minutes or so, with another try. And for them, they scored 23 tries in pool play. Australia then started out, big win against Samoa, 73 points to 0. And then that draw against USA, 31 points all, which meant that it kind of came down to the last game for them. It was a 47-7 defeat to England. But given the fact that, USA had lost by 20 more points to England, and on the final day beat Samoa 60 points to 0, meant that Australia's points difference was enough to put them through. But yeah, it's kind of interesting, because if you look back, not too many World Cups ago, like USA were up there with the likes of, Canada, England and New Zealand as the kind of forces in the women's game. So they've kind of slipped back a bit. And, really what I want to see in a women's game is having, obviously you're always going to have your top teams the way you do in the men's game as well, but having kind of like that rising tide raising all ships kind of effect, that the likes of the USA don't get left behind as well. Hopefully they can fix things themselves and get back to being, really competitive at the pointy end of tournaments as well. But yeah, looking at this, Australia definitely can cause problems. And Canada, you look at them in terms of kind of the four favourites for these quarterfinals. They're definitely favourites for this game. But there's also a bit of vulnerability there. And, Scotland kind of exposed that a little bit. Didn't have the firepower really, or just the ability to keep that pressure on and get themselves ahead. So if Australia can do that, if Australia can get themselves ahead and make Canada chase the game, it could be, one of the most interesting of the quarterfinals this weekend. I think, we talked about South Africa having purple patches against New Zealand. I think Australia could have a really good start and then make it very edgy for Canada. But I do again feel like Canada just have that ability to come through even from behind the last 20 minutes or so and take the win. So my prediction there is Canada to win. On to then Sunday's games. So Sunday, 14th of September, quarterfinal 3 is France versus Ireland. This is a 1 o'clock kickoff. It's at Sandy Park in Exeter, and again you can watch it on RTE. And with this one, obviously these two teams played each other in the Six Nations this year, and France won 27-15. Ireland probably more competitive against France this year than they've been in a while, but goal kicking definitely let them down, and just that ability again to finish off moves, a little bit lacking under pressure. But if we look at the teams, so France winners of Pool D, Ireland runners up in Pool C, and France started off 24-0 win against Italy, which is very good for them, because if you look kind of in the Six Nations, bar England, regularly Italy are the team that give France the most problems of the kind of the other, because it seems to be like England and France are the top two for a long, long time, and then it's the other four kind of similar to each other, and kind of depending on the year, the rankings change a little bit, but consistently Italy generally give France problems in the Women's Six Nations. But France just guided themselves through that game very well. Then played Brazil 84-5, so big victory for them there. And then finishing off that 57-10 points to South Africa. So fairly comfortable getting through their pool, and scoring 26 tries on the way there as well, and only conceding 2. So along with England, conceded the least number of tries in the pool phase. Then we have Ireland. So Ireland started off 42 points to 14, winning against Japan, which was decent because Japan caused them a lot of problems, and Japan actually could have been a lot closer in that game. Ireland kind of found their composure late on and made it look better than it was really. Then against Spain, 43 points to 27. Again, Ireland having enough to win the game, but Spain having purple patches, scoring points and causing them problems. And again, both of those games were, kind of at times where if the bounce of the ball had it gone Japan or Spain's way, Ireland could have found themselves in a deep, deep hole. And then I think, all of those chickens came home to roost really against New Zealand, where, Ireland dominant the first kind of 7 or 8 minutes, a lot of time in that New Zealand 22, couldn't get over. And for the rest of the game, similar. They had a few more purple patches, just couldn't get over the line. And, credit to the Black Ferns defence in that one, in that 40 points to 0 loss. And yeah, Ireland, the thing is 13 tries in pool play. So the least amount of tries of this quarterfinal, of all the quarterfinalists. And again, going against a team who've conceded the joint least amount of tries so far in the terms as well. You kind of, you kind of think maybe it's going to be a similar kind of thing where Ireland are going to have purple patches. They may get over for a try or two, but there'll be too many points kind of left out there with them not being able to finish, and then France will take their chances. And yeah, I can't really see beyond a France victory in this one. And then on to then the final quarterfinals. So quarterfinal 4, it's England versus Scotland. This one, 4 o'clock kickoff on Sunday. It is at Ashton Gate Stadium in Bristol. You can catch it on the RTE player. And again, I'm sure it's going to be live, on BBC or somewhere like that as well. If you're watching from England or Scotland. So, looking at these teams, like England, just in terms of, other than France, and even like in the Women's Six Nations, like France don't give them that many, problems. England just have the wood over the rest of the Women's Six Nations, and it's fairly, most of their victories against the likes of Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and Italy are fairly routine. And like this year, the 59-7 was the score against Scotland. And most of their games against the other nations as well were kind of 40-50 point victories as well. So if you're just going based on that, it's going to be a blowout to England. England scored 32 tries in the pool stages. By far the most. I think it was France next with 26, and then you had New Zealand 24 and Canada 23. Scotland 14 tries, so the second least. Only Ireland scoring less tries in the pool stages. And if we look at it again, the team's progress to here. So first of all, England versus USA, 69-7 in their opening game, then 97-3 against Samoa. So Samoa honestly doing well, keeping the score under 100 in that one, and then 47-7 against Australia to finish off. So very strong performances for England. And the thing about this England squad, like you look at, again, I think New Zealand, the only team that you look at their first 15 and think, yeah, they've got some tasty players in there, even compared to England. And maybe they could stand toe-to-toe with them, certainly for some time. But you look at the England squad, and then even the wider squad that aren't here at the World Cup, and they just have so much depth. Like injuries or whatever, like, there are teams carrying it in, like Ireland, a lot of injuries coming to these quarterfinals. But for England, it doesn't really matter, because they could change, their entire team and still put out, a better team than most of the teams left in this tournament still. And it's that quality is it's very hard to look beyond that in terms of, what the result of this game is going to be. Like, Scotland got here 38-8 win against Wales, which big step forward for them, honestly, because the Six Nations game, narrowly won 24-21. And again, those kind of groups like Scotland, Wales, Italy, and Ireland have been kind of, switching around, knocking each other off for the last 2 years. And nobody from that group of 4 has really emerged as, the dominant third place teams that were to try and close that gap between the rest and kind of England and France. We know, very good victory for them to start out. Then 29-15 against Fiji, getting the job done, and that qualified them for this quarterfinal. And then the final game, then, fairly game in that defeat, 40 points to 19 against Canada. So they've done well overall, and if they were, looking at kind of the lineup for the quarterfinal, if it had been, obviously it couldn't be, but if it had been Canada again or France, maybe you think, okay, that they'd put in a decent shift and maybe, give their opposition a little bit to worry about. But in England, like, it's very hard to see England going out in the quarterfinals. It's very hard to not see England make it to the final, honestly. And with that in mind, I'm obviously predicting an England win and fairly comfortable as well. I think for Scotland, I think it's going to be about their performance that they can put in and just having something to build on. It's been a decent World Cup campaign, and that's already a good foundation for them to work on in terms of going into next year's Six Nations and trying to move on from there, and maybe create a little bit of daylight between themselves and the rest. Obviously, the likes of Ireland will be looking to do the same thing, but the likes of Wales and Italy will be looking to kind of bounce back from their own World Cup campaigns as well. And, it kind of happens a lot where, England and France will probably still be dominant next year. But for these teams, it's about trying to every, 4-year cycle, can you improve on last time around? And for a lot of these teams, it's been kind of in and out, up and down. And it's about that kind of trying to get that consistent improvement World Cup to World Cup. Doesn't mean that you're going to be like beating France or England, on a regular basis, or even maybe not at all between those World Cups. But it's about, can you beat the other teams and just start getting closer to England and France? I think that's the thing for them. And then, again, in this game for Scotland, it's about, can they get closer to England than they did in the Six Nations? I think for them, that would be kind of a mini victory for them. Obviously, they're not going into this quarterfinal thinking, oh yeah, a defeat in the quarterfinal, brilliant, we'll have a great celebration on that. But in terms of their World Cup campaign so far, there definitely are things to celebrate from that, and hopefully that kind of gives them that impetus to kick on, put in a decent performance here. But again, absolutely think that England are going to win that one comfortably. So just to recap, in terms of my predictions for the weekend, New Zealand to beat South Africa to have maybe a bit of a purple patch, but New Zealand just have too much defence and attack to not win that one. Canada, Australia, probably for me the closest that teams might come in terms of an upset, but I still think Canada are going to have enough to pull away towards the end. France, Ireland, then Ireland maybe have purple patches, do not have the finishing ability to seriously threaten France, though France to win that one in the end, fairly comfortably. And then England versus Scotland, England just too much for almost every team left in this competition, and Scotland hopefully put in a decent performance to end their World Cup campaign. So that's what I think. Let me know what you think down in the comments.